Welcome to the TryPod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. I'm Jacob Wynn. We recapped Origin last week. I did get shocked by that result, to tell you the truth. As proud as I am as a Queenslander, we lost the best bet on New South Wales that I tipped Monday last week. And if you did miss that pod, once again, a reminder, I also shared a futures best bet. That's the one and only futures best bet I've given out this year, but that is pending. That was Raiders at $1.83 to win the minor prem. They didn't play last weekend. Storm did win, so not ideal, but still in a solid position there. The irony of Origin was I did a bit of a deep dive into Nathan Cleary's stats. I posted on the TryPod page and Instagram and stuff that Cleary has been a favourite in every Origin start, all 17 except for one. I think game 1 2019, which was a pick'em, right? So he's basically a favourite or under $2 in every single start in 17 games and has a losing record, has 8 wins, 9 losses. And I'm sure you've heard winless in deciders, which is 0-3 after last Wednesday. So I posted that because that is a shocking stat. But then I actually played devil's advocate and I was genuinely defending Cleary in the comments and saying it's not all on one player. And people say he's been totally useless in Origin. Like, well, he still has played in, 3 winning series. He still has had some really good games. Here I am defending him. And part of my defense was I don't think Cleary's right. I don't think he's going to play this weekend. And I think everyone's blaming him when he was clearly injured. Well, he did come off the bench, Nathan, on Sunday, but then he cost me a best bet, essentially destroying Parramatta once he was out there for the final 60 minutes. Like, that was the one losing best bet that cost me a sweep. That game was closer. Parramatta, Penrith, like that was anybody's game. First half, Zach Lomax, I feel like he's the greatest winger on the planet. When you bet against him and when you're on him, he's useless as well. And it was a bit like that in Origin. And Lomax dropped a try that would have cut the lead to 4 in the second half, and with a kick to come. Very next set, Alamotti scoring. And it's like a 12 or a 14-point lead. And then Penrith scores again after that. So it was closer than the final, but like I also laid the points with Sharks. I would say they dominated the Dolphins, but if Rudolph doesn't come up with that play on Marshall King, the Dolphins hit the front late and might win and definitely spoil a Sharks cover. So, I'm glad we get on the right side of that one. And similarly with the Roosters, I don't think I got that game particularly right. I had -5.5 against the Dragons and it was dead even. It's a 1-point game late. You get what's happened against us so many times this year. The team that doesn't really need to score and sometimes isn't trying that hard to score gets a late try, which we got with 3 minutes to go, Radley crossing, and that's the covering play, luckily near the posts, and we get a 7-point win. Because imagine if we won by 5. We're playing -5.5. So we did go 2-1, and I feel like we probably deserved 2-1. Let's roll straight into best bets and then game by game. I don't really have any other special topics to cover, but I love to hear your thoughts as always and value your company, guys. So welcome everyone who's tuning in. Okay, I've got 3 best bets for you to share off the bat, right? We're going to go Rabbitohs under 3.5 tries at $1.85 on Sportsbet. They play Penrith. You still got no Cody Walker, no Campbell Graham. Latrell is back, but Penrith's just on a roll. And Penrith's rediscovered that premiership intensity, been letting in around 2 tries a game in this 5-game winning streak, nearly full strength with Edwards and To'o back in the side again as well. I just struggle to see Rabbitohs coming up with like 20-plus points on Friday night against a really rolling and red-hot Penrith side. On Saturday, I'm playing Raiders -11.5 at $1.80 on Dabble, and they are at home and off a bye. And I don't think the Raiders are going to underestimate Parramatta, who's somewhat waving the white flag. I had to scroll to make sure I got that correct because I had a typo in my notes. But yeah, Raiders against Eels. And we were on the Eels last week, but I didn't know Riles was going to sabotage his side with the lineup. So once again, Para's got $2 million in halves on the sideline. Raiders are full strength. Their Origin players, Huddy Young and Papa come back in. I think that the Raiders might crush Parramatta in that one. So I'll lay under 2 converted tries. And I'll also lay the lumber again with the Dogs. I've gone Bulldogs -7.5 who face the Dragons. So that's $1.87 on Ladbrokes and Neds. And Dogs are basically full strength as well. Getting back Crichton, man, this week. Hard-fought win in Townsville. The Dragons, same old story, fighting hard and falling short. But there's a big class difference. Dogs at a core here. I don't think that's asking a great deal to win by just over a converted try. Those are my 3 best bets. Let me know what you think of those ones, guys. And let's just roll into Thursday night. My team is playing Dolphins, Cowboys at Suncorp. The Finns are 4.5-point favourite. I went against my team last week and we did get the win. Although I thought that the Dolphins were actually really brave and that could have actually been a much bigger margin if the Dolphins had sort of let go of the rope in the second half. The Cowboys covered against the Dogs, but that does nothing for their season hopes. They lost by a try, and they lost basically because they gave up a try on the stroke at halftime, you could say. I don't think there was another point scored in the second half. But then again, the Cowboys should have been level with a kick to go in front when Drinkwater looked like he crossed for all money, only to be denied with the try line beckoning there. So that's how close it was for the Cowboys. But there's no moral victories in that. The other recent history, of course, I've got to bring up when the Dolphins are playing the Cowboys is I've only bet against the Finns twice this whole season because I really like my side. And one was last week when we won, but the other occasion was when the Finns played the Cowboys in Townsville with no Origin players involved. And I took the Cows, and North Queensland were absolutely smoked in that game, and I was dead wrong. This is 10th versus 12th to open round 20, and yet they're still 2 pretty good teams. They absolutely both believe that they are finals worthy and will be highly disappointed should they fall short of the top 8. And North Queensland in particular, you look at them, 6 wins, 10 losses, 1 draw. This is basically must win. Yeah, I don't think you can fall to 6-11 at this point in the season and still recover and make the finals. So you've got to keep that in mind. It's do or die for the Cowboys. Here's another really notable stat. And it was noticeable for me when I was looking at the ladder. I just told you it's 10th versus 12th. There's only one team that separates these two on the ladder. I think it's the Dragons shoehorned in between them, right? But I'll tell you what does separate the Dolphins and the Cowboys on the ladder. Nearly 300 points in points differential. The Dolphins, if you look at just plus minus, have the second best in the whole comp. I think only behind the Storm. The Dolphins are plus 150 points this season. The Cowboys, on the other hand, are minus 144, which is second worst in the comp, only exceeded by the Gold Coast. So in pure points, how many do you score? How many do you give up for the season? It's second versus second last, right? And that was how it played out last time they met, because that is, in a way, that's like an 80-points differential swing because the Dolphins won by about 40 last time they played. And, of course, get the hammer back on deck after getting a nice rest post-Origin. The Cowboys lost McLean in the Dogs' defeat. So I've got both teams that did fight hard last week, both losing. I know on face value, you just look at this game and you go, well, the Finns should be too good, all things being equal. But as I have said, for the last month, the Dolphins forward pack is very thin. We still don't really get anyone additional back. And look, the pack's not a major strength of North Queensland, but I still give the advantage to the visitors in the engine room in this one. And so you've got a team with their backs against the walls. You've got, Dearden leading the way, and he is in some sensational form. And the Finns did miss Nikorima last week. That was compounded by the fact Hammer was out as well, but still, it's not quite as electrifying of an attack without Nikorima there. I noticed the Sharks were really able to key in on Katoa. So there's reasons why North Queensland can win this game, certainly why they can cover. That's why I have left it alone. We move to Friday. This is a good one. Early Friday, you don't always get a beauty here, but this is a good one in Sharks, Roosters. Cronulla minus 3.5 at Shark Park. And these are the 2 teams that we won our best bets with last week. So we had Sharks. We laid 3.5 before Hammer was officially out. They ended up winning by 12. And Roosters minus 5.5, won by 7. So Cronulla's unchanged. It's Fanua Blake's 200th game. Townsend is back in the 6th jersey for the Roosters with Savala injured. Big Chad is preferred over Sandon Smith. It's the same 17 other than that change. So these are 2 teams that I want to buy at this point in the season. So for the Sharks, I'm looking at a team that had zero origin disruption and actually, quite frankly, wasted that period of the year. But still, you haven't had any of your key players having to play in that pressure cooker. You've got a clean bill of health, and it'll be a major failure for the Sharks to miss the finals, though they go into this game on Friday night in ninth. And as for the Tricolours, well, that's a team that I thought would have a struggling year this season. You know, and on paper it looked that way, and then we all wrote them off, didn't we? In round one, when they had 50 put on them by the Broncos at home, and yet Robinson has got the best out of these troops. Talent has emerged where we didn't necessarily expect it. You had 5 players who've got picked for the rep arena, which says something about the form of some of the Roosters' best players. And also, the Roosters will be thankful that none of them got major injuries or suspensions from Origin. And then the other reason we all thought the Roosters would struggle is without their star halfback, Sammy Walker, but he's now returned after an extra long layoff. And the Chooks have actually found their way into the top 8 as it stands right now. They are 8th. So if I had to play this, it's that close. You guessed it. I think I'll take the Sharks, but it might only be a narrow win. I think the Sharks were pretty good last week, maybe just lacking a little bit of killer instinct. And I thought the Dolphins were ultra resilient. You know, the Dolphins got a couple of tries somewhat against the run of play, like from inside their own half in the second half, that prevented it being a blowout score, I feel. So I think the Sharkies are unappreciated in the marketplace. However, you have to respect the Roosters' potency. This is the first year in about 10 years that Teddy hasn't had rep duties. He looks refreshed, like Billy Smith. So many injuries, but a lot of ability there. Toya, what a breakout season. Nwanga and Tuaze, similar. He's been super. Walker, another week under the belt. It's a fascinating halfback matchup. I mean, I look at a lot of the head-to-heads in this game. Walker against Nico, and Hines is off his best game of the season. Collins against Fanua Blake. Radley versus McInnes, the lock battle. Angus Crichton against Nickera. Connor Watson, Brayley. There's not much between these two. So give Cronulla the favoritism for being at home. But then the line's probably about right. And given that I look at the ladder and, you know, a good team or two will miss the finals this year, it just shows you how important this game could end up being. Later Friday night, this is the first one where I've got a best bet. So it's Panthers, Rabbitohs, and again, my best bet, Rabbitohs team total under 3.5 tries at $1.85 sports bet. And I admit it, I was that close to writing Penrith off 5 weeks ago. And it's not that I doubted the ability. Like I said, of course, the squad got diminished yet again when you lose Luai and Fisher Harris. You couldn't possibly say Penrith got any stronger this year. But then you couple that with the struggles, the fact that everybody was getting up for Penrith games and Penrith were just off the mark with their intensity levels. And the reason I thought Penrith wouldn't play finals footy, if you would ask me 6 weeks ago, was 5 Panthers involved in Origin that they were going to have to navigate. They weren't going to win every week during Origin. Well, I was wrong. They did that. The 4x premiers have won 5 in a row now. And it's actually the Rabbitohs that have gone the other direction. I can't remember off the top of my head. I know the Rabbitohs lost at least 5 in a row, and I want to say possibly 6 in a row. They had the bye last week. And on top of that, To'o and Edwards are back. Martin hurt his hand in Origin. He's still sidelined. The Rabbitohs do get back Latrell Mitchell from Origin. But what was I reading today? Cody Walker could be out for the season. Certainly he's not playing this week, right? So Humphreys is at 7. Whiten is at 6. But you got Tallis Duncan, as you can see there in the centres, because Campbell Graham got injured again. And poor Brandon Smith returned to the NRL, injured the same game as Sam Walker a year ago, of course. So he came back in round 18 and did his knee versus Manly. So there's not much you can say for Souths in this game other than, well, they've come off a bye. And the Rabbitohs are 6 and 11, so it would be also a case of do or die. You can't fall to 6 and 12 and still make the finals. But I wonder if that dream has already gone by the wayside for the Rabbitohs, who've had a horror run of injuries. How about Penrith? They were 1-0. See, they have had a winning record this year, but not since round 1 until now. The Panthers have clawed back to 8, 7, and 1. As GT says, Panthers just won't go away. They are a bit like, this will probably age me, but is Jason in the Halloween movies, where it's like it doesn't seem to matter how many times you kill him, It just keeps coming back. I think it's too early for the Bunnies to pull the pin. Like, even if they feel it's not our year, there's still, 6 games to go, and you're playing Penrith. You're going to have a high level of focus. And given that you're off a bye, there's no reason why the Bunnies shouldn't have a high level of energy and effort. But I've got Penrith that's rediscovered that premiership level intensity, and I've got Souths still short some of their sharpest weapons. How are the Bunnies getting 20-plus points in a night game against Penrith? That's why I've played under team tries total, because I feel like, 4 tries, with Latrell being a pretty damn good kicker, that would be 20-plus points. Yes, I'm aware you could you could miss 3 conversions and score 18, and it was possible to play Bunnies under 18.5. But on the other hand, Bennett teams like taking it too early, and you could kick 3 converted tries and you could score 20 and still win with under 3.5 tries, which is why I like that angle. Like, I'm not big on just quote recent stats, but just look for yourself at Penrith's defense the last sort of couple of months. Outside of a Newcastle game where they basically played their New South Wales Cup team, I mean, they're giving up 2 tries a game, and it's been a recipe for success for Ivan's crew, and I think they'll stick to that. On Saturday in Canberra, we have Raiders Eels, and you've heard my best bet is minus 11.5 with Canberra at $1.80 on Dabble, but most bookies are at 12.5 or 13.5. And just again, thanks for the heads up on the team sabotage, Rolsey. I guess he didn't want Penrith to know the game plan. The Dylan Brown situation, I'll just lay it out really quickly, right? So he signs the mega deal and mega long and record-breaking money contract with Newcastle, and fair enough, who would possibly in their right mind turn that money down, right? But the question was going to be, when Brown signed that in round 6 this year, is that going to disrupt Para, because now they know he's going, and everyone says all the right things, and it's all about this season, but this season has slipped away for Parramatta. And unfortunately, Moses, in a career year in terms of form, missed the first 7 games, is out again, right? Lomax missed time. So the season's sort of gone. So you can somewhat understand the thinking of the coach is, we've got other players we might want to have a look at in key positions. What's really the point of leaning on Dylan Brown and building that combination when we're not going anywhere this year, and then Brown's out the door at the end of the year? So apparently the Eels actually said to Brown, because they're paying him near $1 million a season, if you want to leave early, you can go to Newcastle and start that next chapter. And supposedly Dylan Brown was like, no, I'm sweet. I'll just stay here and I'll go there next year. Probably because the Knights are a mess this year. What was he going to be walking into? And I don't know whether the Knights would have had room in their cap. Like, maybe Para wanted to move him on. It would have had to be a negotiation of Para would have to say how much of the freight they would pay, right? But apparently Para said to Dylan Brown, if you stay, we'll be using other combinations. Your spot's not guaranteed, right? So then last weekend, unfortunately for me, when I'm on Para for a best bet, that's the week they decide, yep, let's just torch this all. Let's play Dylan Brown the first 25 minutes at hooker and then take him off and then watch the team capitulate and then put him on with 6 minutes to go or whatever it was. Like, I could somewhat also understand, all right, you want to give Joash Papali'i a shot at 6. Okay, why don't you just wait until Mitch Moses is back? Or why don't you play Brown at 7 and then play Papali'i at 6? Like, why would you just throw Brown in the garbage when you haven't even got Moses back, right? Because you will have one premier half next year, and the question is who's going to partner Moses in the half. So it seemed a bit extreme, and it sort of signaled some intent for Parramatta, which is part of the reason why I'm going to fade him this week. So you're also curious what's the story with Brown this week. At the moment, he's in the reserves, so he's not even in the 17 at all. That means Josh Papali'i gets another chance at 6. Hawkins is at 7. Riley Smith at 9, and De Silva, who's just joined from Tigers, is in at 14. While the Raiders have had a bye, get Papali'i back and Hudson Young as well. And that's why I think this is a great spot for Canberra. Prior to the bye, the Raiders had 3 ugly wins, and you just get such an easy game here, honestly. Like, it's at home, you're off a bye, and it's against the Eels, missing $2 million from their halves. If you're playing Canberra, which I am, your only concern is that they take the game too lightly. that the favourite is complacent. But the fact that if you look at Canberra's last 3 games were Tigers, Knights, Dragons, maybe not exactly that order, but those are the last 3 opponents. And all 3 of those games, I think, were a 4-point margin. They were all 1 try in it late. Like Canberra got a scare in each and every game. So I think that says something about not taking any opponent lightly. And I think Canberra's ready to just comprehensively dust somebody for 80 minutes. That's what you should do every so often when you're top of the ladder. And this looks like a great candidate to do so. I'm looking at Para. Yeah, Ayongi's been a shining light. But have you guys seen the form of Cairo Weeks? He's been breathtaking this season. You got Strange and Fogarty as a wonderful halves, complement to each other. The Raiders pack have too much punch for Para to repel. I think it'll be a long afternoon for the Eels. And Riles, trying to justify his decision last week, said the future is now. In other words, this season is not the priority anymore. We need to think about the future. So if your priority is not even playing the best football you can play and not picking the best team for this week, you know there'll be some growing pains for Para, and then he's got the excuses when the results, fall that way. So I could see some capital punishment being handed out in this one, guys. And Padonis is on this game as well. So let's find out if he sees it the same.
G'day, guys. Padonis here. Hope you're all well. Had a bye round last week, but we're back for round 20, ready to go. And we're going to lay it with a big favourite here. It's going to be the Canberra Raiders, minus 11.5, $1.80 on Dabble. Parramatta Eels right now are a team that's sitting at the bottom of the ladder, looking towards the future. And Rolls epitomised that concept this week by moving Dylan Brown to the 18th man, which we got a taste of it on Sunday. And I think we've seen that they're going to lean towards the guys, Josh Papali, Riley Smith, Talon De Silva. Katonga's been great for him on the left-hand edge back row this year. He's been a bright spot, but he's out this week. Canberra was fully fit, off a bye, ready to go at home. I think last week the Bulldogs winning and Melbourne winning has helped keep pressure on them at the top of the ladder to stay in that top 2 spot. So I just think Canberra are going to be primed up for this one. They haven't covered recently against some of the lower sides of the table when they've been a big favourite. I think back to the Tigers game, even as recent as the Dragons we saw, and even the Knights a few weeks ago, coming back in the second half and grabbing the cover there. So I think Ricky Stewart's going to make a point to have them primed up, ready to go. They get back their origin players in Hudson Young and Papali'i. I just think that Canberra at home, this spread should be 14 or above. Good luck, gamble responsibly.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And once again, I don't look at the tips from the other guys. I always sort of stay independent, but also I literally get those clips with seconds to spare. I nearly didn't get Padonis' tip in time because he missed my little deadline and got that to me about 2 minutes before we went live. And occasionally I hear that from the boys and go, oh, I'm kind of jealous of that one. I wish I was on that. I didn't find that one. In this case, we both found the same and see it very similarly. And I think the Padonis is about 11-5 on his tip shared each week. He mentioned he didn't get one in last week with the Thursday timing of it. And also, that we're 75% or better when more than one, or when a sharpshooter tip aligns with the TryPod's best bet as well. And I do have a best bet on the next game too, which is still on Saturday. Dogs, Dragons at a core. Line 8.5. Dogs favourite, but I have played the one minus 7.5. Of course, you want to shop around. You want to play through a key number when you can. Both these sides played down to the wire a week ago, right? Well, they're playing on Saturday. So the previous Saturday, you had the Dogs triumphing in Townsville. You had the Dragons, who avoided losing 4 times this year by 1 point. It looked like the Dragons were going to go down for a 4th time by a field goal. But the only reason they avoided that was because they gave up a try, an additional try with 3 minutes remaining. Thankfully, they did for our best bet. So Lockie Galvin starts at halfback this week. Let's just talk about Galvin because nobody else is really talking about Galvin in the media, are they? So, why don't we just dissect the situation? In all seriousness, I'll give my 2 cents, right? And I'll fill you in. The Galvin was a healthy scratch against the Cowboys, right? So he was named on the bench and then didn't play at all. And, of course, the Dogs just narrowly got that win. And I do sort of feel like 2 things can be true because a lot of people are like, well, what's the thinking there? Is that admitting a mistake? Is that the Bulldogs in shambles, right? I do think you sign Galvin, right? Of course, you're signing him for the future partially, but you are also signing Galvin because you believe you've got a team that has a chance to make a grand final, to contend for a premiership, and Galvin can help. And how can he help? Well, he's a gun half, like he is naturally a 6, but obviously they felt like he could play halfback. People feel in the future he can play lock. I feel like he's got to improve his defense. Could he be, utility or a strike off the bench? The other part of it is that people look at a player and go, well, how does he fit into your starting lineup, right? But you know how brutal the NRL is? There's injuries every single week. I mean, the likelihood that a team gets all the way to the grand final and never has like an injury to a spine player is highly unlikely. So if nothing else, Galvin's given you like a very high level of depth and backup, for your halves. And he's young and he's willing to do that. He's come from a team that's won 3 straight wooden spoons. I'm sure he's really happy to be in the Dogs. I'm sure he's not kicking stones just because it was held out of a game, right? So Galvin can help the Dogs win the comp or contend for it, but he also may not be in the best 17 given the squad makeup right now. I feel like both those facts can be true, but you have to sort of work Galvin in to potentially raise the ceiling of the team. And I suppose off 2 straight losses, Ciraldo sensed like there was a real importance last week. So he felt like, all right, it doesn't matter about the best for the team at the end of the year. We just have to win this week. So I've got to pick the best combination this week. However, what's curious to me is you rested Lockie Galvin in an Origin week. Like you rested him even though you're missing the captain, Crichton, and like in a previous game with Crichton out, Burton shifted to centre, and that allowed a spot for Lockie to play 6. And Kurt Mann was out as well, which would have opened up a utility spot. And yet, Galvin still couldn't find a spot in the team, and the Dogs won. And as a result, now Sexton is benched. So does Toby Sexton deserve this? I mean, we all speculated when Galvin was going there, are they going to slide Burton to the centres? Are they going to put Crichton at fullback so that Galvin can come in, right? Is he coming in to play 13? And I did say the only position that seems to make sense to me would be he's coming in to play 7. And everyone thinks, he's a runner first, like he's not a natural 7. But there's lots of good running 7s out there. I mean, think of Metcalf. A lot of people doubted that he could be a good 7. I'm sure people said similar about Jerome Hughes when he was first transitioned from fullback to halfback. So I suppose that's what I see in terms of the potential of Galvin. So ultimately, we're just going to find out now. He's going to get to play 80 minutes because I do also think it's a bit unfair and there is a lot of pressure when Galvin's on the bench and he doesn't get put out there until the final 15 or 20 minutes. And it just so happened that 2 weeks in a row, it was against a really good opponent in Penrith and Brisbane, and the games were in the balance. And so when Galvin came on, they happened to have a lead both times and they lost both games. And then Galvin gets the blame for the loss. So if at least giving him the full 80, he can have his impact in the game and see, we'll see how the result falls. And in my case, with the best bet -7.5, I hope that Galvin has a good game. And I also just wonder, and you shouldn't really think this way, but I wonder if Ciraldo looked at it and said, Cowboys in Townsville, Dragons in Sydney. Let's give Galvin his first start at halfback in the less difficult game. But maybe that's disrespectful to the Dragons if Ciraldo was thinking that way. But that's just my suspicion that Ciraldo didn't want to upset the apple cart before the tougher game, potentially higher leverage game. In terms of other personnel, Cherry is out, but Critter back from Origin duty. Tupanua, remember how good Tupanua was going earlier this year? How are you going to fit him in this team? I'm looking now, and it's like Preston and Kikau are your starting back rowers, and I don't even feel like there's room on the bench for Tupanua at this stage. So that just shows the Doggies' depth right now that it's hard to fit him in. But that's a good headache, as the old cliche goes, for a coach. Flano hasn't changed his Dragon side that has done almost everything but win for the last few weeks. I'm playing the Dogs here, though. I do think there's a big gulf in the class. I've got, home advantage. They've been really strong at a core. Stars returning. And I'm looking at St. George. I'm not looking at the Dragons as a team that, they're close most weeks, and one of these weeks they'll put it together and they'll go on a run. I'm looking at it the other way. I'm looking at the Dragons are fighting as hard as they possibly can. I think I saw Blanchy in the chat. Let me know how you see your team, mate. But I'm seeing the Dragons giving all their effort every week and falling short, and I think at some point could fall flat. And if there was going to be a flat spot for the Dragons against a genuine top 4 side, is a pretty likely occasion, which is why I've laid the points with the Dogs. We have a rivalry game late Saturday night. Sorry about the background noise. My little boy, I think he's missing dad right now, and I think he's being prevented from coming into the office. But I'll keep pushing through, guys, and get this pod done, and then we'll get back to family and dinner and bath routine. Storm Seagulls. Manly are a 9.5-point underdog on the road. Melbourne were poor for 38 minutes, but still rolled the Knights, just getting that late try in the first half and then cruising in the second. And that was without Pappenhausen, Munster, or Xavier Coates. Manly had a bye after a good win over Souths, to remind you. Now, in terms of team lists, as you can see on the screen, Pappenhausen remains out, but Coates, Munster rejoined the side, and Liero is starting again. Manly's unchanged from their last win, so that means Hopewadi remains at 1, Turbo in the centres again. And I remember we did have a best bet last time these sides met, and I laid 4.5 with Melbourne in Manly, and they won very well. And now you flip home field, and I do think it's similar. Well, it is similar value. If a team was 4.5 points favourite in Sydney and now in Melbourne, they should be like an 8.5 or 9.5 point favourite. But you've got to still give a point of value for having a bye this time of year. Meany's not the same threat at fullback. And like Melbourne can deal without Pappenhausen, but Farlongo is also out. And then you got Warbrick as well on top. Not like Bradley's held his own, but not a superstar out there in the outside backs. And like I don't want to take much away from Melbourne. I still think they'll win this game. I look at Manly's pack, and they've really missed Paseka this year. TKO is just a bit past it. Same with Matty Lodge. That's a class below Melbourne, who I think Melbourne's pack is quietly damaging. I don't think they're the first that come to mind in terms of the most dominant packs in the comp, but you've got Nelson, Kamikamitha, Lasati all on the bench. So what I will say about Manly is looking at the lineup and the outside backs and the halves there, that I can see some points in Manly on this Sunday arvo. So the Seagulls could make it close if a couple of things go their way. But basically, Melbourne, strong favourites at home. A line close to 10 points is in range for me. Oh, and sorry, did I say if I misspoke if I said that was an afternoon game? That's Saturday night. So, nevertheless, I think Manly will know that they're underdogs and can roll the dice and potentially can have some joy and score a few points, which gives them the ability to cover. But yeah, we don't have a triple header Sunday. So that's Saturday night. Now we move to Sunday, Tigers, Titans. And the Tigers are a 4.5 point favourite at Leichhardt. Is this the passing of the torch game, or should I say passing of the spoon game? I think these sides meet this weekend and in round 27. So if the Titans are trying to avoid the spoon and potentially deal a fourth straight to West, they have to start by winning this game. We've got Taylor May, who was signed by West and had a good game in New South Wales Cup and will start at centre this week, which moves Dewey to lock. Samuela Fainu hurt his knee in the loss to New Zealand. Des has not swung the axe on a team that, to be fair, came within a group drop ball of covering against the Broncos. Crazy how the Titans were down about 22-6, and then suddenly it was 22-16, and then the Broncos scored again, which really hurt the Gold Coast, and the line was 10.5, and then the Titans looked like they'd scored for all money and got the backdoor cover, but I think it was Shibasaki having a charmed week, dislodged the ball, and Brisbane wins by exactly 12. So the Titans weren't disgraced, but I did talk about that game potentially being Gold Coast's grand final. So you're never going to be too thrilled when you lose your grand final by 12. Look, I admit as well, this is an ugly one. Even someone like me who is a diehard lover of rugby league, my best tip's going to be, get outdoors, do something better with your Sunday than watching this game in full. Leave it to somebody like me. Let me suffer and let me watch this in full, and then I'll tell you if you missed anything. I don't think you can get much value going against the Titans. Like, you might be tempted to play West here because the Titans are struggling so badly, but because they are highly unpopular, nobody really wants to back the Titans. So the bookies aren't going to do you a favor if you want to go against them. And I still look at like Brimson's actually having a solid year. Campbell in and out of the team with injury, but is pretty dynamic. You got 3 forwards who represented Queensland this year. You got Fafita did come back via the bench, didn't do much, but I don't know. Always hold hope. If a players show me what they're capable of, I do always believe, well, you can't fluke. Like you can have bad games, but you can't really fluke having great games. And I suppose it's just we're getting further and further removed from Fafita playing great footy, but off the bench, ultimately I still think the Gold Coast can go toe-to-toe with West. But then again, the Tigers get home advantage. So you've got to make them favourites. I like the Dewey position switch. However, Buller being out as well doesn't make the Tigers nearly as threatening of a proposition. So I've got unpredictability about both sides, and that's what you expect too with two teams that are not consistent, which makes it harder to bet and harder to find really strong line value as well. And ultimately, I will also just say both of these teams, they want to avoid the spoon. They look at each other and they know it's hard to win each and every week. Like these teams know it. It's hard to get a win in the NRL, but they look at their opponent and they say they're beatable. Like if we play our best, they're beatable. And so that might make both of these teams desperate because they just want that winning feeling. And it's a game where if they play their best, they actually can win, as opposed to when the Tigers or the Titans play someone like Canberra, Melbourne, Canterbury, Penrith, where even if they play well, they still might not win. So for that reason, let's hope that this game is played with a bit of intensity and desperation and that makes it watchable. It'll also be more watchable if you can find a try scorer winner. And Nicole is back this week with a clip. Let's see.
Hey everyone, it's Nicole from Wiki. Look, I found Tino Fa'asumalawi paying $9 on Bet365. He's one of my favorite try scorers, as you know, and for good reason. He does score a try every 5 games. Look, up against some of the stronger teams in the NRL, he does have a juicy price pretty often, so I do tip him relatively often, but he's playing the Tigers. So I love the $9, Bet365, Big Tino. Good luck everyone, punt responsibly. As always, Google Wiki Linktree, our try scorer, odds comparison tool, punters preview article, our Discord, all that stuff is all free for the season. So good luck and enjoy the weekend.
Nicole loves a middle try, as always. Tino back in the starting lineup, as Nicole mentioned there. 1 game to go. We got Knights, Warriors, and the Warriors are 7.5 point favourites at McDonald Jones. So the rumours this week as well, Adam O'Brien is out. It actually sounds pretty good on paper when you say that he's had 5 seasons and the Knights have made the finals 4 times. Like that is a really good record, but I definitely don't feel like that encapsulates the full story in terms of Newcastle consistently underperforming and AOB always seeming to just be dishing up excuses, right? So I feel like some dominoes are falling now that if Adam O'Brien is out, that means Newcastle needs a new coach next year, but so do the Titans because we just talked about them. It's been pretty much widely reported that they can sack Des or terminate his contract if they don't make the 8, which they won't. And it's already sort of been agreed that Des will retire after this year. So who's going to take those jobs? Let me know, because Blake Green is the assistant in Newcastle. And he's that type of guy that, like, no disrespect, was never very talented, but got like a great deal out of his career and played in systems like Melbourne. And sometimes those guys end up being the best coaches because they had to prolong their career by just completely understanding the game, because they weren't out there because of supreme athleticism or talent. They were out there, just because of a really high work ethic and, real good understanding of the game and of the 1 percenters. So it could be time for Blake Green. And I wonder if the Knights got a sniff that like Des was leaving, so therefore the Titans were going to be in the market for a coach. And so they felt like, well, they're going to pinch Blake Green unless we do something. And so maybe it was time. Maybe the Knights' hand was forced for succession planning. Josh Hannay, where's he assistant coach at now? I'm sort of having a blank. He was the caretaker in Cronulla. Someone in the comments will let me know. Obviously, Hannay was the assistant coach for Queensland and played his part in a successful series win there. And Hannay is also, a very capable coach. I've heard Dean Young as well, and that might fit the spirit of, Newcastle working class, type side that Dean Young could get them playing with a lot of effort. So how does that bode for the rest of the year then if Adam O'Brien is a dead man walking essentially? I'm not going to back the Knights and find out in this one, though they did look the better team against the Storm, and I think Benny Howard backed them with the start. Oh, and Undertaker had Storm unders, and the Storm only had about 2 points in the first 35 minutes, and Newcastle looked the better team. And I was watching that game going, I should have been on the Knights. I think I didn't know that Pappenhausen was going to get scratched again, but I did suspect like a couple of the Origin players would sit out, and Munster did sit out in the end, though Harry Grant played and Liero did play. And ultimately that game for the Storm just all turned in about a 20-minute blitz where the Storm just torched the Knights, scored 5 tries, and that really hurt the Undertaker, let me tell you, because I think they ended up with 30 or 32 and a half. They ended up with 32 points, and he played under 30 and a half. And that obviously got the cover as well. As for the Warriors, it was similar. They were in a real tussle against the Tigers before pulling away late. And it was a great first impression by Tanner Boyd. Did you guys hear that factoid about Titans or former Titans halfbacks? I'm only joking. I'm sure you know that one by now. Gagai at fullback actually went all right last week, but Dylan Lucas is a big loss for the Knights. And then you've got Capewell in for the Warriors. Sorry to say, I've got just the 3 best bets this week because this line does feel fair to me. If I'm going to play the Knights, I've got to trust that the effort's still going to be there. New Zealand's got plenty of results this year on the road in Australia, so they've been reliable to back away from home, which isn't always the case. The issue for New Zealand, I suppose, you look at the Warriors, there's not really the firepower to blow a team away, so that the Warriors need to out-effort and out-enthuse an opponent. But that's the question. Now the Knights, sort of who had to win last week, the Knights season is all but gone. Is there any life? Is there any hope? And is there any enthusiasm left in Newcastle? And if not, then they'll get beat by 2 or more tries in this game. So it comes down to how much life you believe remains in the Knights. I also think New Zealand's the public side. So I do think like you might get the better line value playing Newcastle, but you've got to have faith. And sometimes there are teams towards the end of a year that look like you're getting line value, but if they're just dead and if the energies and the life's sapped out of the joint, and if you're not playing for the coach anymore because he's not going to be there, and obviously Ponga's not there anymore, and well, I don't know if Dylan Brown is seen as a savior, but he's the highest paid player in history coming to the team next year, focus starts to change a little bit. So Warriors fans, let me know. JK says Warriors young gun forwards are scoring threats. Warriors -6.5. Let's go. So yeah, I didn't have a play on that one, and I think it just comes down to the Knights' attitude. Skeptile, do you think Storm's still in box seat for the grand final? Yeah, I do. I think it's a question of who meets the Storm in the grand final, and I think only major injuries would derail the Storm, and they've got that much depth that even a major injury could probably be covered because you do have the likes of Wishart, off the bench, Garlic, Farlongo when he recovers from the hammy. And of course, there's question marks over whether Ponga's even going to be there long term. He's got the foot injury at the moment, Del Toro, but there's rumours about European rugby and All Blacks and all sorts. So although Branko does say Knights will win, you'll see. I guess I don't know about that, but I guess let's also not forget that the Warriors don't have the best record as a favourite, and in games where they're expected to win, sometimes when they play their worst. So, yeah, I'm not ruling that out. Any team that's a 7 or an 8-point favourite can get a win. I just don't have a trust factor. I'm sure you guys can understand why. That'll do it. That's my breakdown of round 20. Let me know, as always, in the comments. Carry on the conversation. What do you think of my best bets? And what else do you like for yourself? And I'll be back in 7 days' time to let you know how we went and then preview round 21. So have a great week. Appreciate your company and Lego.